And so you didn't come to church to get homework, but I'm going to give you some homework. Parents and grandparents, testify to your children. Don't tell them all the gory details. Don't tell them all the stuff they ought not to hear. But just tell them what God has done in your life. Tell him of the healings that God has done. Tell him of the deliverance. Tell him of your salvation story. Tell them your testimony. You see, if you don't transfer it to the next generation, here it is. A generation can rise up that doesn't even know the Lord. And what will they do? They will serve someone else. Because we're all worshipers. We're all worshiping something. Hey, some people just worship themselves. But they're going to find something to worship. They're going to find something to pour their time, their talent, and their treasure in, and their whole life. They're going to find something to worship. They will go and they will serve idols. They will put other things before God. We read in Judges chapter 2 and verse 10, and also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there rose another generation after them which knew not the Lord and didn't even know the works that God had done for Israel. Why? Because they didn't testify to the children. It's not just what I believe. It's not just what I say, but I must transfer it to my children. Genesis 9 verse 28. We go right back to Genesis. We read about this man Noah, and we think of Noah so fondly because what he did. Built an ark, saved his family, man of faith, great preacher. He was building with one hand and preaching with the other. It says in Genesis 9 verse 28, and Noah lived after the flood 350 years. Wow! And after his greatest achievement, Brother Musica, he went on to live another 350 years. Well, such a great man, what did he do? I want to know. I mean, in the early part of his life, he built an ark, he preached, he did all those great things. He was a mighty man. He lived another 350 years after the ark. What did he do? I'm all ears. I want to hear. See, we know a lot about the first part of Noah's life, but the Bible doesn't tell us anything about the last part of his life. 350 years, Noah, that's pretty good. 3 lifetimes. 3 lifetimes after the flood. We know what he did before the flood. Yeah, he spent 120 years building an ark and getting the animals on board. He spent 40 days and 40 nights, maybe probably 100 days altogether by the time the flood had resided. He's building altars and all those things. That's great. Wow. Noah, that's incredible. But what did you do in the 350 years after? We have no idea. The Bible doesn't tell us. You know what he did like a lot of people do? He built an ark for the saving of his house. But after his house was saved, he did nothing. And Noah began to be an husbandman. Genesis 9 verse, he went and planted himself a garden. He planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. Noah! You got another 350 years to live. What? I mean, Noah, you are the only person on planet Earth that has talked to God. What are you going to do 350 years? You're the only person on earth that knows how to build an altar and to offer sacrifices, Noah. What are you doing? He's the only man on the planet that understands the covenant that God has made with the world. What's he do? He lays on his bed drunk. But Noah, you're going to live another 350 years. And here's the tragedy. He never connects with the next generation. He was so consumed with his life in the past, and he had no vision for the future. What is the future? Well, you see what the future was. The future was the Tower of Babel. They were so disconnected from the God that Noah knew that they began to build a tower. You see, Noah is the only one that can do it. It's locked up inside of him. He's talked to God. He builds altars. He knows the covenant. It's all locked up inside of him. But he doesn't connect it and testify it to the next generation. Noah, you ought to be testifying, not laying on your bed drunk. David's trying to change that mindset. You see, the generations of the Old Testament ended up being so pathetic that by the time we get to the first generation of the New Testament, what is it called? A wicked and perverse generation. A sinful generation. Peter gets so bold when he's preaching. He says, save yourselves from this untoward generation. They've lost their way. They're untoward. Nothing got connected. He said, well, Pastor, I'm hearing you. I tell you, parents, it's locked up inside of you. It's our responsibility to testify to the children. You want to leave them a legacy? Yeah, I hope you'll leave them some money. But you leave them money, they're going to spend it. You leave them your car, they probably don't want it. They're going to trade it in and buy a new one. You leave them the farm, they'll sell it. They'll probably subdivide it and build houses and make money. You leave them your wardrobe, yep, like me. You just end up in an op shop somewhere. What are you going to leave them, David? Well, David, I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them, I'm going to give them the one thing that doesn't date. I'm going to give them the one thing that's always going to be relevant. David says, I'm going to tell them the wonderful works of God in my life. I'm going to transfer to the next generation. I'm going to tell them the power of God. I'm going to tell them how God saved our family, how God saved me from addiction. I'm going to tell how marvelous God is. I'm going to tell them how good God is. Let's all stand in this place. Testify to the children.